Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. Time right now is 2:33 Eastern, 11:33 Pacific on this Sunday, May 12th. And we do want to continue to follow all of the major stories that happened in the previous week, as well as looking ahead. That includes former President Trump's hush money trial, where it is set to resume on Monday with star witness Michael Cohen expected to testify. Cohen had previously served time in prison after pleading guilty to campaign finance charges and lying to Congress, among other crimes. The campaign finance charges came after he helped arrange payouts during the 2016 presidential race to keep adult film actor Stormy Daniels and another woman from making public claims of affairs with Trump. Trump has denied those affairs. And again, Cohen is Trump's former attorney, expected to take the stand on Monday. I do want to bring in Neama Rahmani, who is a former federal prosecutor, as well as the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, to talk more about this past week's events and what to expect in the coming week. Neama, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, thanks for having me, as always.
Absolutely. So Stormy Daniels, she took the stand. She testified last week. What do you make of that testimony?
Stormy Daniels testified on Tuesday and Thursday, and it was damaging politically for the former president. Now, she did change her story. She said that she wanted to tell her story, but obviously she took $130,000 to remain quiet. And there were inconsistencies in her statement. She obviously previously denied the affair multiple times, and she was telling a different story on the witness stand. But really, so much evidence came in that shouldn't have come in last week, really damaging allegations politically about Donald Trump and Melania sleeping in separate rooms, sexual positions, unprotected sex, really salacious stuff that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the allegations in the case. Because let's not forget, we're talking about false business records. Were the payments to Michael Cohen legal fees, or were they reimbursement for hush money payments? The details of the affair didn't really matter, but it all came in last week.
And let's talk about that, because all of that is irrelevant. So why was there so much detail involved? What was the point of it all?
There really wasn't much of a point aside to dirty up Donald Trump. And I think the prosecution asked too many questions, but more importantly, the defense failed to object. They did a really poor job, especially on Tuesday. They should have been objecting early and often, having that testimony stricken. Really a strategic legal error on the part of Trump's defense team to let all this evidence in. Because if you fail to object as a lawyer, that waives your objection on appeal or during a mistrial motion, unless there's clear legal error, which wasn't the case here.
And let's talk about mistrial, because Trump's attorneys did request a mistrial. That request was denied by the judge.
And Judge Merchan denied the mistrial twice. And really what he said was, really, you should have objected. This is too little too late. I mean, when questions are coming out whether Donald Trump was using a condom, I mean, the defense should have stood up, aggressively objected. So the judge faulted the defense attorneys and saying, you didn't do your job, so don't ask me to start this trial all over because you failed to do so.
Now, next Monday, or tomorrow, really, Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney and so-called fixer, is expected to testify. He is that key witness because this is where all the charges stem from. What are you expecting? What are you most interested in hearing as he takes the stand?
Obviously, we've all been waiting for Michael Cohen. Like you said, he is the star witness. He's going to connect all the dots. So we know, like the previous segment, that he's a convicted felon and an admitted liar. So his cross-examination is going to be brutal. And even some of the other witnesses who testified already, like David Pecker, the head of the Inquirer, or Keith Davidson, Daniels' lawyer, they've already impeached Michael Cohen. So if I'm the prosecution, what I need is independent evidence that corroborates what Cohen is saying. Because if you're relying on his testimony alone, given the changes and lies that have happened over the years, that's going to be a problem for the state.
Let's talk about his credibility, because again, he went to prison for lying. And so there's that big question mark. No doubt Trump's attorneys are really going to focus in on that. But given his credibility from the jury's standpoint, what needs to happen on either side to use Michael Cohen to their advantage?
Well, I think the defense has the upper hand with respect to Cohen. A lot of cases come down to likability and credibility of witnesses, and Michael Cohen is not credible and not likable. I mean, everyone who's testified so far said they didn't like the guy, and he's making threats and he's lying. And I mean, hopefully, if you're the prosecution, you have something to substantiate, corroborate what he's saying. Because if you're relying on Michael Cohen alone, you're really going to have a tough time getting guilty verdicts in this case.
So up until now, with all the testimony, obviously we haven't heard yet from Michael Cohen, and according to the prosecutor, there might be one other witness that they call. The strength of the arguments to this point, from your perspective legally, where does that stand?
I think the prosecution still has the upper hand, but just for misdemeanor convictions. And this is why. I think the defense took a pretty aggressive position saying that the affair never happened. And I think and that Trump didn't even know Stormy Daniels. Well, there was a lot of evidence that Trump had her contact and there was some communications with her. I think the state has likely proven, obviously we're not there yet, that the business records were false, that they weren't legal expenses, that they were reimbursements to Cohen. But under New York law, false business records, they're just a misdemeanor unless they're in furtherance of or to cover up another crime. That's why we're hearing all this discussion of election fraud and campaign finance violations. I don't think the state has gotten to the point of a felony yet. And if they move forward and just get misdemeanor convictions for false business records, I think that's a loss for the prosecution.
And let's talk about former President Trump himself. Do you think he will take the stand?
I do. And this is why. He took the stand in the New York civil fraud case. Trump has tried to speak publicly. Obviously, he's been hit with 10 violations of that gag order. But I think he's going to want to speak to the American people. Let's not forget, obviously, we're in the middle of a presidential election. And it's not necessarily what happens in the courtroom, but the court of public opinion. I think Trump wants to take the stand. I think he will take the stand. I think the stakes are too high politically for him not to.
If you were his attorney, would you advise him to take the stand or not?
Lawyers hate when their clients take the stand because the entire case comes down to their testimony. But I don't think Trump is going to be jailed, even if he's convicted of all the felonies. I mean, you could tell that Judge Merchan is hesitant to jail him for violating the gag order. These aren't very serious crimes. Now, some of the other 3 criminal trials are, but this particular case, we're talking about a Class E felony in New York. If I were Trump's lawyer, I would absolutely roll the dice, tell him to take the stand, talk to the jurors, talk to the American people, tell your story. I think it's hard to do so relying just on the lawyers and their opening statements and closing arguments.
It's going to be very interesting to watch. I also want to get your opinion because there were a number of other legal cases that really had major developments involving former President Trump. The first, the Georgia election interference case. The judge has agreed to take the appeal, of course, this regarding Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. What do you make of that?
Well, Trump is winning in all the other 3 cases. We can start in Georgia, but the same holds for D.C. and Florida. In Georgia, really all Fani Willis's fault here, hiring her boyfriend, the whole sideshow of the proceedings regarding her disqualification. And now that Nathan Wade has stepped down, the defense has still successfully petitioned the Georgia Court of Appeal to hear the disqualification motion. So what does that mean? We know that delay is the friend of the former president. If he's elected in November, all of his criminal problems go away. And Fani Willis in Georgia was already the last to file. She charged 19 co-defendants, which really delayed the process. Now, because of her personal antics, it's delayed it further. So that case, there is no chance it's going to go to trial before November. And that's a win for Trump and his defense team.
And again, with the classified documents, you were alluding to that in Florida, that has been on hold indefinitely as well. As you mentioned, another win for former President Trump. As you take a look at the hush money trial and what we're expecting this week ahead, do you think this trial could be in the hands of the jury by the end of the week?
I don't know about the end of the week because I do expect the defense to put on some case. And I think the cross examination of Michael Cohen will last days. And I think the defense, whether Trump testifies or not, I think we got a little bit of a preview of what their defense is going to be. They're going to blame an accountant, the accountant. I don't know who that accountant is. That will be the fall guy because Trump will say, listen, I signed the checks, but I'm not the one that's actually handling the bookkeeping and how those expenses are categorized. So if someone booked it as legal expenses, that's not anything that I'm involved in. So I do believe there will be a substantive defense in this case, whether it's accounting or other expert witnesses or Trump himself. They're not just going to rely on arguing reasonable doubt at the end of the state's case.
All right, Neama Rahmani, thank you as always for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and you are watching Live Now from Fox. We are going to